Alright, so last week, Deadpool and Wolverine debuted into theaters. I've seen the movie 3 times. That means today I'm going to give you a ranking of all 14 X-Men movies. Alright, so the X-Men franchise is really unique for me. It's funny because all of the best movies of this franchise rival the best movies in the MCU, because the best movies in this franchise are really good. All of the worst movies in this franchise are some of the worst comic book movies I have ever seen in my entire life. That's what makes it really interesting, because I waited to watch the movies I've heard was bad last, and so the franchise just kind of got a sour taste in my mouth, because I've had to watch my final 2 as my last 2 movies I've watched. But before I get started, please make sure to subscribe and like button, hit the bell, and comment down below what is your opinions on the X-Men franchise, what's your ranking of all the movies, and with that said, let's get started with my ranking, and coming in last place, number 14 is X-Men Origins Wolverine, also known as my least favorite superhero movie of all time. Yes, this beats out Morbius as my least favorite superhero of all time, and if you've been a subscriber to my channel for a while, you know that I hate Morbius with a burning passion, and I hate this movie with a burning passion even more. It's like the people who made this movie woke up one day, thought to themselves, people like that original X-Men trilogy, right? What if we just completely make a movie that just completely ruins the X-Men trilogy before, because it's a whole new lore and does not make a single sense, all while being a story that is genuinely the most generic comic book story of all time, because that's what this movie is. If you sit back and you think about it, what are the things that this movie ruined? Let's think about it. Wolverine's origin story, it's boring, it makes no sense half the time, it's got so many plot lines that don't make sense. Let's see, we get a live action Gambit in this movie. I love Gambit, he's my favorite superhero character, or not superhero character, but he's my favorite X-Men character. He's ruined because he's just like there all of a sudden, and he's like, yeah, Stryker has this mutant area where he's experimenting on mutants. Stryker, one of my favorite X-Men villains of all time, he's in this movie, ruined because he's just kind of like the one guy, hey, I experimented on you guys, but he's not intriguing or he's not scary at all, anything what Stryker should be. We get freaking Cyclops in this movie, my god. I was disgusted at what Cyclops did in this movie. He was awful, because all of a sudden he's just like getting tested on for his mutant powers. Why? That's not his lore in the other movies, and thank God X-Men Apocalypse fixed that, because it's useless. It's a terrible script. The first 2 acts of this movie are just boring and generic, but then when we get to the 3rd act, the color grading, the cinematography, everything makes it look like a low-budget direct-to-video movie. You guys remember The Incredible Hulk? Have you guys ever heard of that movie? I got vibes from The Incredible Hulk watching this movie. It put a very sour taste in my mouth from the first X-Men trilogy, because this movie is what they did after it. It's terrible. It's my least favorite superhero movie of all time. Oh yeah, and freaking Deadpool's in this movie, and they sewed his mouth up shut, because, you know, he's the merc with a mouth. Awful. Awful movie. I could not stand this movie. It's my least favorite superhero movie of all time, and it's my least favorite X-Men movie. 13, and I wish I could say it's far off, because I was kind of looking forward to watching this, because it's the first time viewing for me, but it's not far off at all. Number 13, X-Men Dark Phoenix. It's the most boring superhero movie, one of the most boring superhero movies. I watched it, and from the very beginning, it has this dark vibe to it, to where everything just feels gritty and dark. What's so good about the beginning of the trilogy of the prequels of the X-Men franchise is that everything's just like so full of hope. Look at X-Men Days of Future Past. Like, it's this whole apocalypse world. By the end of the movie, you get the hope. And like even X-Men Apocalypse, it's super dark. You get the hope with these hopeful characters. From the very beginning of this movie, it's just boring and it's just dark because there's no hope. Like, the very beginning, you're going into space, everyone's tone is, obviously nobody wants to be here. Obviously everyone's tone is just so melatonin and dark and drewy, and I cannot stand it. And like, even anything interesting was done, it's just bogged down because it's like nobody wants to be here. There's no heart, there's no soul into this. All the other films in this specific X-Men franchise have heart and soul into it, and this one doesn't have a single bit of that. So not only was I bored throughout the entire movie, if Apocalypse didn't ruin the continuity as much, this would be the one that ruins it all, because guess what? Mystique dies, Jean Grey dies. Guess what? We still have the trilogy that goes after this movie. What? I mean, why do you kill off characters when you know they're in future movies without giving us like a fake? Like, what? I'm so confused. And by the time that we get to the finale, where I'm told that the train sequence is super cool, I was just so out of it. I was so bored of the movie because it's all just dark and drewy, and the number one word that comes to mind when I'm talking about this movie is boring. Number 12, I'm going with X-Men: The Last Stand. Let's be clear, not Days of Future Past, that's a great movie. Dark Phoenix, all the way down here. Dark Phoenix is like, it buried 6 feet under for me, and Last Stand is all the way up here compared to that. I don't love The Last Stand, it's definitely got issues, but I enjoy it. I like some things that they do to try to cap off the trilogy. I don't think that the Dark Phoenix stuff in here is as bad as people say. There's some cool action sequences because they mainly focus on the action sequences in filming this movie. The first 2 acts are really, really entertaining, to where I was like, this is not as bad as I remember. I'm actually really enjoying this movie. And then we get the third act, and all of the plot lines that this movie is throwing at us, this entire movie, it's all kind of getting concluded in a 20-minute third act, which means we got to deal with the mutant cure, the Dark Phoenix saga. We got to deal with Juggernaut trying to get the kid for the cure. We got to deal with Magneto losing his powers and then moving the Golden Gate Bridge. We got to deal with all of this stuff in the third act in 20 minutes. And right as we head into the third act, I'm like, we're ending now? This is where we're ending? What? Why are we ending here? And it feels really odd because the way that some of these conclude are pretty cool. I love it when Logan takes his claws and jabs it into Jean Grey's stomach and says, and just starts crying, because that's a great sequence. But like, even everything cool in this third act, it just feels all rushed. And by the end of the movie, it's like, that's it? That's how you're gonna cap off this trilogy? This movie should have been 2.5 hours. X2 was 2.5 hours. And this movie is 1 hour and 45 minutes. Everything great that should have been about it is kind of abolished in the third act, where it was rushed through. Still an enjoyable movie. I would much rather watch this one over any other movie that I just talked about ever again, but it definitely has its issues. In that same boat, number 11 is X-Men: Apocalypse. This is another movie I really enjoy, and this kind of prequel set. I really love these characters, James McAvoy, everyone who performs these characters, I genuinely love. Again, it feels hopeful. It feels hopeful, and like just this nice tone for an X-Men movie that I really do enjoy. And the tone set throughout the movie is kind of like Apocalypse vibe, and it's really cool as it feels like it's this big X-Men event coming to us. The X-23, or not X-23, but the Logan cameo in this movie, awesome. What they do there, awesome. There's some great action pieces, and even though that the movie has pacing problems for sure, like there's not a single action sequence until like 1 hour and 15 minutes into the movie, it sets up all the plot lines that it's wanting to go in a pretty nice way. This feels like a big blockbuster, and I enjoyed 2/3 of this movie. And then we get the third act again, and just like The Last Stand, this one does not work, except that this one is over 1 hour long. Or I think it's like 50 minutes long, not over 1 hour, but it feels over 1 hour long, that's for sure. Every time it feels like we're reaching an end, I was sitting back like, yeah, this is a great time to end the movie. 2 hours and 15 minutes in. No, we need to keep going. And by the time we get to the end, it just does not feel satisfying when they defeat Apocalypse. It feels very like, oh, thank God that it's over. And that's how I felt. Considering the last 20 minutes just felt like a complete drag. I was getting really bored because I don't think the finale fully works. There's so much great stuff that could have been a great third movie in this trilogy, because we pretend that Dark Phoenix doesn't exist, and then you decided to go on, and on. And it really just ran its end. So it's another movie like The Last Stand that I was really enjoying. I'd love to have it higher on this list, but the third act really soured the movie for me. Number 10, we're going with The New Mutants, and this is kind of where we leave the bad category, but it's also more like a meh, too bad movie. So I enjoy this movie. Stuff in this movie I enjoy. It's overall just a very generic thriller movie, but I enjoy thrillers, so there's still stuff to enjoy here. The Smiling Men are freaking awesome. Every scene that the Smiling Men are on, I just love this movie because they're really cool designs. Some really cool action sequences when we see the powers that these mutants are using. I think they're very cool. But overall, it's just a weird movie for me, especially that it capped off the Fox X-Men movies. It capped off those movies, and it's just like a thriller at a place where, yeah, they're mutants, they have superpowers, but it's trying to be scary. It's a really weird mix of horror and superhero that I've never seen done before, and sometimes it just doesn't land. Like I said, everything with the Smiling Men is great. There's some cool action sequences in here, but it just feels weird throughout, especially that's trying to do like the Breakfast Club with the New Mutants, where we get a bunch of romance here. I don't feel like the romance with the two girls fully works. Just feels super cringy to me, and not because they're lesbian, but because it just feels really off-putting to me in this movie. Every other romance that it tries to do just feels really weird. The vibe doesn't fully work there, and there's definitely some pacing issues. And then the third act, the fight with the bear, just it's a CGI fight that I don't feel is too compelling. So while there's still some cool stuff here, it's very watchable. It's very generic, but it's very watchable. I just had this weird feeling throughout the entire movie, because with the X-Men franchise, this movie doesn't quite match into the category. Another movie that doesn't quite match the category, but I do think is better than The New Mutants. Number 9, we're going with The Wolverine. And it doesn't quite match into it, because this is another black sheep in this franchise, where it's a movie about Wolverine fighting the Yakuza. It's not a movie about Wolverine fighting mutants. It's not a movie about the X-Men fighting mutants. It's about Wolverine and the Yakuza. It's decent, it's good, but it's another very weird movie, because like throughout the movie I'm sitting back thinking, yeah, but he's just wasting these guys. What about the Yakuza? There's a nice story here. I find that there's a compelling mystery in this Japanese world that they're exploring here, as we got all these different factions and who's trying to, why are they trying to kill this girl, and all that's happening. And I feel like the reveals are solid. It's not like the best intriguing mystery, but it's genuinely intriguing, and it's unique for an X-Men movie. It's got a nice vibe here. There are some cool action sequences, not as cool as Logan, not as cool as so many other X-Men movies, but there are some solid ones here. And I don't hate the samurai. I don't hate the Silver Samurai in this movie. I find that it's kind of compelling, because it's kind of what I was missing in this movie for the majority of it, which is mutants. I feel like we needed mutants to fight Wolverine instead of just the Yakuza, because it felt like a very odd premise in here. And I really did like it when the Silver Samurai showed up. And yeah, it's a stupid premise, but that's what the X-Men movies are about, and that's kind of like a hot take of mine, that I do enjoy the Silver Samurai stuff. So there are some cool stuff in this movie. There's some stuff that I really do enjoy, but it's a black sheep in the X-Men franchise. Number 8, we're going with the original X-Men, a pretty huge jump up from the other ones. So Dark Phoenix and Origins is way at the bottom. Well, The Last Stand and Apocalypse is kind of somewhere near the bottom, but kind of in the middle of the bottom to the meh. And The New Mutants is in the meh, and I'd say The Wolverine is in the good. I do like that movie, but it's still very odd. Where we get X-Men, it's in the good. This is officially where we start good movie territory, and I do enjoy this movie. Where this movie really shines for me is where it's focusing on Magneto's plot. Yeah, it's goofy. He has a machine that could turn people into mutants. It's goofy, it's dumb, but it is very entertaining. And when we're going to see Magneto and seeing the X-Men fight Magneto and all that, what's happening in the end, I really do enjoy. I thought that was the best part of the movie. Obviously, the cast here is great. Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen as Professor X, and as Magneto is great. We got Hugh Jackman introduction as Wolverine is great. James Marsden, I think, is a pretty good Cyclops, even though he's kind of sidelined. I really like how we get our point of view into this world, following Logan and following Rogue as they are shoved into this world, same as we are. It's a very unique way to see this world, and so it's a very good movie. It's a good movie. It's entertaining. It's fine. It does have problems. I feel like the pacing could be much better. There are definitely times it drags. The movie feels way longer than an hour and 45 minutes, which it actually is. But overall, as an introduction to this universe, this is a movie that needed to be made because modern superhero movies would not be the same without X-Men, and I do enjoy this movie. Number 7, we're going with Deadpool 2, and I know it's weird that this is my least favorite Deadpool movie because I used to say that it was my favorite one between the two before I saw Deadpool and Wolverine, but rewatching all these movies, I really liked the original Deadpool much more than this one. This one does have issues. Overall, it's really fun. It has a story that's able to bring in some characters I love. A comic-accurate Juggernaut is great in this movie. We have Cable, one of my favorite X-Men characters as well. I think he's really cool in here. The X-Force, genuinely funny scene. There's some good action pieces in here. David Leitch directs this movie, and while the CGI is a big problem with it, there's plenty of scenes that look atrocious and kind of takes me out of the movie, i.e. the Cyclops and, not Cyclops, but the Colossus and Juggernaut fight in the end does not look good. But some of them take me out, but there are some cool action set pieces when it's Deadpool wasting guys. I think that's pretty cool. So a cool story, a cool concept with Cable and his time travel. Gets a cool story to see all these characters bringing in, and some solid action pieces, and it's a Deadpool movie. Obviously, it's entertaining as hell. It's a very fun, entertaining movie. And so, yeah, the movie does last a little too long. I feel like they do introduce a little too many plot lines. By the end of the movie, it just kind of wears your patience just a little bit. Not a whole lot, but just a little bit, because you're like trying to do this and this and this and this. And yeah, the CGI is a big problem, but I still really enjoy this movie, and it's a personal favorite of mine. Number 6. X-Men First Class. This is the X-Men movie that I have seen the most amount of times. I've seen it 3 times this year. I saw it 3 times last year. And to a point, it becomes a little annoying watching this movie over and over. I still really enjoyed this movie. I still really like this movie. But I used to say that's a really respectful movie into this universe. Watching all the other movies and watching this one, yeah, that's not totally true. I noticed so much stuff, like how is Mystique so much younger than Charles? If Charles met Mystique, like when they were both kids, how does that make sense whatsoever? There's other things here that don't quite line up with the original movies, but besides stuff that kind of took me out just a little bit by breaking continuity, it's still a very good X-Men movie. I love the chemistry between Charles and Magneto. Both actors are stunningly good, especially James McAvoy, who is my favorite rendition of this character of Charles Xavier. I love their chemistry in this movie. Forming the X-Men is pretty unique. My first couple watches, I didn't like this crew of X-Men, but now that I've grown to like it, now that I've seen all of the movies, I really do like this crew. They are pretty cool. There is some plot lines here that kind of makes sense for a prequel, showing us how answers we want to know, like how did Hank McCoy become the Beast? How did Magneto get all these mutants to turn evil? I really like that stuff, and it's just a nice story set in the Cold War, kind of historical fiction here with Kevin Bacon, who is a great villain, setting up for the Cold War, and a nice movie that you could feel like Matthew Vaughn directed. It feels like a Matthew Vaughn directed X-Men movie, and it is ridiculously entertaining. I really do enjoy this movie, and while it does have a little bit of problems, this is a personal favorite of mine. I do enjoy X-Men First Class. Kicking off our top 5, the newcomer in this franchise, Deadpool and Wolverine. Seen it 3 times in the theater, and I'm considering going a 4th time. I'm not going to go see it a 4th time because I'm broke, but I do really, really enjoy this movie. Where the movie shines is when it's a road trip movie between Deadpool and Wolverine. It is incredibly fun. Both actors have great chemistry. Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman is a fantastic actor. He brings sincerity like no one else can. And yeah, I did get that from Sean Chandler, but like I watched his spoiler review where he was talking about that, and then I go see the movie 2 more times, and I just really, really noticed that because he delivers all these funny lines in just such a serious way, and I really like that. There's some great action sequences. Sean Levy is a great director, so he directs these action sequences in a nice, stylized way that I think was really cool. And the cameos really work in this movie. They are like No Way Home's cameos, where they really work for the plot. You get to see these characters one more time. It's basically giving a nice send-off to the Fox universe of X-Men movies. And not even just X-Men movies, the Fox universe of Marvel movies, and giving a nice send-off here. The character arcs, they are good. They're not as strong as some other ones in the Deadpool franchise, but I do really enjoy the character arcs here, so I really enjoyed this movie. Yeah, the story doesn't make any sense. The story is just a generic, boring, stupid story. But boy, if I say I'm not having a blast every time I go watch this movie, and if I say I would not go see this again, that's a lie. I would love to go see this again. It is such a fun movie. Number 4, X2, X-Men United. I really, really, really like this movie. It's a perfect sequel to the first X-Men, where the first X-Men was kind of like a prototype. We get cool stuff with the villains, we get some cool action sequences, some pacing issues, but yeah, it's a fun movie. This movie fixes every issue it had by making an epic X-Men movie. Everything you want from an X-Men movie is great. We have a better villain than Magneto. Yes, I just said that. Yes, I do think Stryker is a better villain. Stryker is one of my favorite villains. We get a finale that lasts the last hour, but unlike X-Men Apocalypse, it never gets old. There's some great action sequences in here directed by Bryan Singer. Some great character arcs. We're finally learning a little bit of Logan's past in this movie. The sacrifice by Jean Grey at the end is awesome. We get Nightcrawler introduced in this movie. Again, some great action sequences, especially the one at the X Mansion I thought was great. So this takes a sequel, what a sequel should do, make it bigger, make it better, and that's what it does. It's a sequel that doesn't bring in too many character arcs, too much stuff that doesn't make sense. It's a sequel that brings in the right amount of extra stuff, heard the complaints that people had with the first movie, and just made it better. And I love this movie. Easily one of the best of the X-Men franchise and the best of that original trilogy. Kicking off our top 3, before we do that, please make sure again to subscribe, hit the like button, and hit the bell. And remember, comment down below, what is your ranking of the X-Men franchise? Stay tuned in a couple days. I am going to have an X-Men franchise ranking to where I'm going to rank the original trilogy, the prequels, then I'm going to rank the X-Men trilogy, or the Wolverine trilogy rather, and the Deadpool trilogy. All that's going to be combined in a ranking that's going to be coming in the next couple of days. With that said, third, we're going with the original Deadpool. I used to be really disappointed with this movie, thought there was pacing issues, thought the movie didn't totally work, but when I rewatched it, I realized that it's a really simple movie. It's a simple movie that really, really works. Where all the other X-Men stuff have time travel and big explosive action sequences, this movie focuses on Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool. As he has cancer, he's trying to fix the cancer, focuses on his origin story, and it's just a solid revenge story. It's nothing, anything big or spectacular. It's a simple romance story. It's a simple rom-com is what this movie is, and I really do enjoy that. The simple heart where this movie comes from is that romance with Wade and Vanessa that I do think really works, and I hate that they keep breaking them up in the later movies in this franchise, but it's a romance that really, really works in this movie. Tim Miller directs awesome action sequences. There's some awesome action sequences. I think this one is the funniest out of all the Deadpool movies. I just remember laughing the hardest at this movie. So there is some great stuff in here. The movie works in the simplicity of it all. if it tried to do anything big or anything like that. That's where Deadpool 2 kind of falls a little lower for me, where I love the more simplistic version of Deadpool. Watching this one over Deadpool 2, where Deadpool 2 has like this big explosive stuff. Deadpool 3 works because the story doesn't matter in that movie, but this movie just works in the simple stuff, and it's exactly what Deadpool should be. Really enjoyed this one. Number 2, X-Men Days of Future Past. I really enjoyed this movie. It's another movie that my first viewing I was slightly disappointed with. Second viewing, I thought it was great. It's everything, again, just like X2, everything that a great X-Men sequel should be. Brings up everything that we loved about the first movie, which in this case is X-Men First Class. And it brings it up in a manner that we have all of the original X-Men with Wolverine and all that in the beginning, combined with the sequel, the prequel X-Men with James McAvoy, Charles Xavier, everybody else in that kind of era, and it really meshes well. Charles Xavier has a great character arc here that I find really works. At first viewing, I kind of got a little bored of it. The second viewing, I thought it really worked for his character. It's, again, brings the bigger stuff. It's got a bigger plot. But it's also kind of simple in that bigger plot, where it's just about trying to find Mystique, trying to stop her from killing someone, because her just killing one guy could prevent the apocalypse. And I love how simple it is in that execution. And again, just like X2, it takes everything that we loved about that first movie, and it just brought it bigger action pieces, a bigger story, a better villain, all of that worked in this movie. It's an ensemble movie, feels like an event. The whole vibe of the X-Men Days of Future Past really works for me, and I loved it. But number 1, my favorite X-Men movie is going to be Logan. Even though the Wolverine trilogy, rather, is what I'm trying to say, has the worst movie in this franchise, it also has the best movie in Logan. I really love this movie. It has a beautiful character arc for our central character in Logan, beautiful character arc for Patrick Stewart as Charles Xavier. Everything that works there really works. James Mangold, where he went so well in the Wolverine, he especially brought it over here to Logan. Made it all so well with the great action sequences, great villain. It focuses on mutants going after Logan, so I really like the story here. And it's just a great story that feels massive but also feels contained. It's about this group going after Wolverine as he's old. It's not about like the fate of the world, but it's about Wolverine becoming the right person he is to save these kids, forming the relationship with Daphne Keene as Laura, who I think is great in this movie. Again, some great action sequences. The villain as of X-23, the fake Wolverine, I think was menacing and was great. And that beautiful finale where Logan dies is great. I meant to rewatch this one before I did this X-Men franchise ranking. I didn't have time to, but I'm going to rewatch it in the next couple of days because I do love this movie so much. It feels great. The moment I watched it, I knew it was going to be number 1 on this list, and it was not going to move. But that was my ranking of all 14 X-Men movies. What is your guys' ranking? Tell me down below in the comment section below. Stay tuned for the X-Men franchise ranking coming in a couple of days. Also, I'm going to have an M. Night Shyamalan ranking, Star Wars TV shows ranking, the TV shows of 2024 ranked. It's going to be a busy week coming right up. But thank you guys for clicking on this video, and with that said, subscribe to join the Nerd Army. Peace out.